Welcome to 28.5 Women's Basketball, where we explore a unique and authentic perspective on the women's game, break down upcoming matchups, and discuss the latest news and trends in women's basketball. We are your hosts. I'm Sydney Story, and I played basketball at the University of Tennessee under Pat Summitt.
And I'm Becca Goodman, and I played at the University of Notre Dame under Muffet McGraw. And we're thrilled to have you join us today. Before we jump in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear, be sure to tune in each week and don't forget to follow, download, and listen to give an assist and share the love. Now let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Sid, what's up?
Hey, Becca, how you doing?
I'm good. You know what, Sid, this is our 21st episode.
Look at that. We are kicking butt and taking names. It's pretty cool. That's a lot of episodes in one season here so far.
Honestly, when we first started this, did you think we would be having like churning episodes out like this?
No, I mean, in full transparency, we started the season thinking we were going to drop one episode a week. And then there's been so much to cover, which isn't a surprise. Women's basketball is just fantastic to watch season over season. We know that. But we've done these bonus drops and team huddles, and we've kind of doubled up on it, which has been super fun. I think we're just having really fun with it. We're having a great time with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, women's basketball is so much more than it was when we played in
Absolutely.
a great way. On the court, off the court, transfers, upsets. That's been an ongoing theme this year. I just think there's just really good quality of women's basketball right now. So much so that I rarely watch men's. I have yet to watch some men's basketball because I'm just tuned in every week. It just seems like another great game to watch, or, you know, we're watching one game and then you and I are texting like, did you see this score? And we hop over to that one. So just a lot of good basketball for sure.
Yeah, with the emergence of NIL and social media is an actual thing. When we played, when nobody had Facebook was on the scene, but there was no Instagram, there was no X, there was none of this. And now I think the personalities are coming out through social media, through NIL. So it's so much more fun now to follow players and individuals because we get to know them a little bit more in their social media accounts. And now there's, sideline reporting where they're talking to coaches within the games. And we didn't have that when we played. I think that's been a little tweak that's been fun to watch also, is to kind of get the coaches' perspectives. And there's things like that I think have evolved that have maybe been little small things, but have made a huge difference for sure.
Yeah. I think Coach McGraw would have hated that piece. She probably would have dodged it in every way, shape, and form. Because I know she didn't like, cameras in before games for the pregame talk or stuff like that. She wasn't about that. It was a private moment. And I think she just liked that intimacy to keep it that way. So I think she would have been dodging those sideline reporters for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely the game of some of the new school coming through.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to see which of the coaches from back then have adapted to some of it and which have maybe shied away a little bit. And not that it's taken away from any programs or anything, but it's interesting. I think there's some coaches that absolutely embrace it. Like you look at Nielle's social media, her presence with her team, and it's fun to follow Notre Dame because of what Nielle even does on social media. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, the players even have their own air quote red carpet outfit walk. So it's interesting to see that has become added to the game. Definitely something the NBA did, the WNBA is blown up about, and to see it come to the college game, it's just super interesting to me.
Absolutely. It's so fun. All of these things really add to the entertainment and the whole package of the women's game right now.
Let's head into our episode today. We have 4 packed full quarters. It's interesting we're doing 4 quarters, but it's a bit like 2 halves. The first and second quarter are going to be about upsets. So our first half, if you will, is upset city. Second half, aka quarter 3 and 4, are just about some great games that we're going to highlight, some close calls, higher seeds hanging on, and we're going to dig into it a bit more. So let's jump in. First quarter, all you, Sid.
Let's do it. That first upset, unfortunately, number 15, Tennessee, my Lady Vols, lost to Vanderbilt by a score of 71-70. This one is a tough one as a Lady Vol. That's that in-state rivalry. So while Vandy maybe isn't one of the top 25 teams in the country or even really on the map as being a great team or a good team to lose to, it's that in-state rivalry that means more. It means a little bit more. We want to make sure on the Tennessee side that we're taking care of business and consistently beating Vandy. And to lose this one, just a little bit of a thorn in the side for me a little bit. But I will say it is a tough environment to play at Vandy because of the way that the court is laid out and the gym is laid out. So the benches, instead of being on the sidelines, are on the baselines. It's a little bit different there. The court's elevated. It's in an old Opry house, so the acoustics are a little bit different, and it's just got a different feel than anywhere else you play. I don't know. Did you ever play at Vandy, Becca?
We did. My sophomore or junior year, we had one of our biggest comebacks there. So it's absolutely an environment that thrives in just showing up for a good game when they need it to. But no, I agree with you. The court's raised, having the benches on the end lines is super interesting. And then the coaches can walk all the way to half court.
Yeah.
So they're on the sidelines, but their bench is underneath the basket. So it's unique to say the least. One of one. Maybe not. They're like, somebody's going to tell me there's another one and we just don't know about it.
Right. But certainly not in the SEC level or the ACC level or the Big Ten and a lot of the games we watch here. So a little bit of a different feel. And it's one, like I said, that you want to take care of business on. And so to lose this 1-1 and really was a barn burner in the end there is a tough loss. But to jump into this, I think a lot of credit needs to go to Vandy. And really that stems from Shea Ralph, who started as the head coach for Vandy in 2021. So it's her fourth season right now. And she is an absolute figure in women's basketball, right? So a lot of people know her from her long tenure at UConn. So she played in 1996 to 2001 for UConn. She played in 2 Final Fours. She was the most outstanding player for the tournament her senior year when UConn won that national championship. So she won a national championship as a player at UConn. And then she coached for Gino as an assistant for years.
Yeah, forever.
From 2008
I remember her on the bench.
To 2021. So she really has learned from one of the best coaches in our game. While Shea was a player for UConn, she had a record of 130-10. It's just so hard to fathom winning that much, right? Like so much success. She's seen what it takes to win tight games. And in this case, she was able to coach her team to victory here. So just a good side nugget around Shea Ralph because she deserves it and what she's done for women's basketball. And it's exciting to see that Vandy, under her reign, might be on the map a little bit here. So kudos to what she's been able to do so far. But anyways, in this game, Tennessee, to me, they're playing that style where they're subbing a lot of 5 in, 5 out, but it didn't really show through as much in this game. And I think it's because it was so tight, but it didn't look like the traditional Tennessee basketball that they're playing right now. I will say that they were still throwing up a lot of threes and the shots were not falling. I think that was a huge Achilles heel for Tennessee. We talk about this because they rely so much on the 3 ball. If their shots aren't falling, we talk about this being like a little bit of a weird gym here, not necessarily a shooter's gym. They shot 6 for 26 from the 3-point line, or 23%. So that's going to hurt them, right? So if shots are falling in this case, I think they win this one by 10, 15, but they weren't, right? And kudos to Vandy. I thought that their defensive pressure was great. They've got a couple players right now that are really worth watching. They have a freshman, Blakes, who entered this game leading all freshmen in the country with 360 points. So she really is a freshman to watch on the Vandy sideline. And she ultimately tipped in a bucket at the buzzer. One of the most athletic plays I've seen in a long time out of the women's game to win this one. It really came down to the last possessions here. If you look at the fourth quarter, Jewel Spear was huge for Tennessee. She hit back-to-back 3-pointers for Tennessee to tie the game at 57 all. The Lady Vols took a lead on a 3-point play by Spencer, and then Spear had 2 free throws and made the game 64-59. So at this point, there's 3 minutes to go in the game. Tennessee could have really turned the corner here, got some stops, got a couple more buckets, and outright won this one. But when you look at Moore, she hits a 3-pointer down the stretch. You look at, again, Blake's again. She hits a jumper down the stretch. Pierre had 2 key free throws, and before you know it, Vandy goes on a 10-4 run, and now they're on top by 1. So it just was a very back and forth game of runs in that fourth quarter there. Tennessee did take the lead when Ruby Whitehorn hit a layup with 4 seconds left. 4 seconds left, she hits a layup. They take the lead. And this is where Vandy did not back down. They did not give up. Blake's inbounds the ball, and there's a drive that's made down the lane, and a shot goes up, and Blake's ultimately comes from behind and tips it in. Like I mentioned, such an athletic play, and they win it at the buzzer. But what's interesting about this one, and I want to bring you in right here, Becca, is if you replay what happened on the play, and the announcers didn't touch it, and I think that's fair. Tennessee comes in and flat out takes a textbook charge. Her feet were set. She falls down. Looks like I said, textbook charge there. There's a no call, right? It's when the girl's penetrating down the lane before the tip in even happens. The Tennessee girl flat out took a charge, but it's a no call because of time possession. It's interesting to talk about this. Do you think that charge should have been called at that moment or not?
So interestingly enough, in this day and age, there's so many cameras, there's so many visuals, there's so many opportunities to get calls right versus not calling it or calling it and it being wrong. I think we've seen this in many other games. I honestly think it was a charge. It was clear as day. All the attention was there. She was set. She fell. It was perfect. And honestly, Vandy, they're not... The environment, the comeback, the whatever this is, I don't know if that had anything to do with it. I do think that was a charge.
Yeah, and you think it should have been called.
And I think it should have been called. And it's not even because it's Tennessee and any of that. It's just when people look at our game or any game and there's proof like that out there, and it's not like it was a off the ball play where, can be misinterpreted different ways. It was like all the attention was right there. I think that's where you get skeptics or you get people like, how did they miss that? How does this not get called? So seeing it over and over, seeing it live, set, took the charge, should have been called.
Yep. And it's interesting because in the Final Four, the actual Final Four game with UConn last year, do you remember when there was the off ball away from the basket?
Yes.
There was a screen.
Yes.
I think it was Aaliyah Edwards.
I think so too.
She sets the screen for Paige Beckers on the wing, and they called the illegal screen. That was one of the very last plays, and it was a huge momentum swing.
Yep.
Took away UConn's possession down the stretch, Iowa's ball. In that case, that's where I think maybe there's a no call when that happens.
For sure.
You review it. It's in flow of the game. Yes, wasn't it a legal screen? Questionable. Right? Like, in this case, textbook charge, no call.
Yeah.
Game over and the tip in, Vandy wins. So that was a tough one to follow. I will say games aren't necessarily won on just those one plays, right? Tennessee didn't have their best showing, and I think that mattered, right? They got down by 11 in the game. We can't keep getting down like we're getting down. There's been multiple games now, especially in SEC play, where we're down by 11 points, 17 points, 18 points, and then we got to try to make these comebacks, which we can do in the style, but I want to see where we're consistently playing and not having off quarters. And in this case, Tennessee in the second quarter only had 5 points. We talk about how you can't take quarters off and have a bad quarter and expect to win games, especially in the SEC or the Big Ten or the ACC. And they had 5 points in the second quarter. So that's to me, that is more where the game was lost and not playing a full 40 minutes.
I didn't realize it was only 5 points. That's devastating to a high-scoring, high-tempo team. It's not like they were running the stall game. They run and gun and launch threes. That's their style. So to only have 5 points, it's shocking. Honestly, it's quite honest. It's shocking. And that's that fear when you have an off night. What else are you doing to get points? Because that's really all that matters. If you're not locking up on the defensive end, making stops consistently and not scoring, that's different. But if you find yourself getting in a hole and you're still kind of running that same style and you're off, how do you get an easy bucket? How do you get something going your way?
Right. And we've talked about that a lot with Tennessee and being a big call out there. And kudos to Shea Ralph and the Commodores, because I think of all the Tennessee games I've watched this year, they truly took them out of the system more than anyone else.
That's awesome. Very cool. Going back to that, I'm not going to deliberate on this shot with the charge, no charge. I also think I like when players don't rely on refs to make a call for the game, right? A lot of times players go in on a drive and fling it up there and flop and try to sell it a bit more. If this is a good no call in the sense of they actually tried to make a play on the bucket and then followed it back up with a putback. Like, that was ideal if this were to be a no call. What makes it feel a little yucky is it was so obvious that it was a charge. She was set. There was no middle ground of, oh, she was kind of sliding over, didn't get there before she took off. That's the difference. And probably as people are listening, like, she's playing both sides of the fence, but there's just specifics when you know the game of basketball of what is like blatantly a call or what's like, okay, it could go either way, right? Props to Vandy for following up and just continuing to play, not just launching a shot and flinging themselves out of bounds and that being it, and relying on the refs to make a call.
Excited to watch Blake's also. I mean, we talked about how she's one of the best freshmen in the country. Let's see what she can do at Vandy throughout her career. And I think it's going to be fun to watch Vanderbilt going forward a little bit here.
And I'm not putting bad mojo out there, but it will also be interesting to see if she stays there, right? With all this transfer portal, all this NIL, you never know. And she's already making a huge splash for herself, her in her freshman year, rightfully so. I do think Coach Shea will do a great job of keeping her there. She has that experience from UConn, having high impact players, but we'll see where that goes. I'm interested to continue to follow her for sure.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting.
All right. Let's jump to our second quarter, our second upset of the day. You talked about Tennessee just not playing the style or the consistency that we're used to seeing from Tennessee. This quarter, another team, it was this exact same thing. So number 9, Ohio State, who was 17-0, one of our last remaining undefeated teams, undefeated in conference play. They were upset by Penn State. Now, normally, and no shade to Penn State, normally, if this is, another Big Ten team that's, has some wins under their belt, has some other news or notable wins in the conference, it would be, okay, you can see where you'd have an off night. Penn State was 10-9 for their season so far. This was their first win in conference. So tough to see Ohio State get their first loss on a team that's like 0-8, right? That just feels a little yucky. This was also Penn State's first win against a top 10 opponent since 2012. So
good for them.
Yes, and let me highlight this even more. Sid, you're at Penn State. You're having a season. It's like, you hope to go 500. Your conference is not the best. I mean, you're not playing well in conference. Your conference is loaded. Penn State had just played USC and UCLA and lost. Then they come into this game against the number 9 Ohio State. So 3 top 10 teams back to back to back. What is your mindset going into Ohio State after you just played USC and UCLA, got huge L's, and you are what you are currently in the season? How are you feeling realistically?
Almost like you have nothing left to lose a little bit. Like, maybe you mix things up. Who you're going to start, who's going to play more minutes. Is there somebody else on the bench that can give you more that maybe wasn't given opportunities in the back-to-back losses?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was a home game for Penn State too.
Yep.
Which no matter what, you want to be on your home court. You're used to the baskets. You're used to the feel. My big thing on this one, like when I was flipping back and forth and watching it and flipping back and forth and watching a lot of games on Sunday, we talked about the Tennessee Vandy atmosphere. It was rocking in there.
Yeah. Yep.
You watch South Carolina, and every game, it's rocking in there for them right now. You flip on this Penn State, Ohio State game, and there was like nobody in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they lulled Ohio State to sleep a little bit.
Yeah.
Ohio State scores 59 points. You're not going to beat even a mediocre at best Penn State team if you can only score 59 points.
So do you remember just in our first quarter, folks, we mentioned Tennessee had one quarter where they scored 5 points? I think any single digit quarters are good. I mean, you're setting yourself up to lose. Ohio State had 2 single digit quarters. The second quarter they had 9, and the fourth quarter they had 8 points. I mean,
wow,
17 points and a half, pretty much. How you can't expect to compete, especially with the team that's at home. This is their practice, their court that they're used to. They're hitting, they're rolling. Yeah, and OSU led for 23 minutes, but in the fourth quarter, they were 2 for 12 from the floor.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know.
Ouch. Like you said, it's a bad loss. It's not like they lost to USC or UCLA or Maryland or any. It's a bad loss.
Yeah, and Ohio State's going into every game averaging 38 rebounds per game, but Penn State actually beat them on the boards. They beat them 39-21. So,
Yeah.
We
Wow.
talk about Ohio State. We talk about McMahon having an amazing presence inside. She's a go-to. She had her 19 points, not as many rebounds as we're used to seeing from her, but respectfully, right? Gray had 18 points, but the bench for Ohio State only chipped in 5 points total. So when you're struggling and you're trying to get something and you're subbing people in, it's deflating when you have people off the bench and you're hoping to give you something, whether it's locking someone up on defense, causing turnovers, or giving you some points. But they only had 2 people get a 3 and a 2, so 5 points total. Penn State's bench, Oden came in and gave 13 points by herself. So Penn State's bench players coming in and was the second leading scorer for them. Merkel had 12 points and 10 boards for Penn State. Murray had 12 points. And then the senior guard, Gabby Elliott, really led the team in general. Clock management, just overall consistency. She had 14 points and went 6 of 11 from the floor.
Kudos to Penn State.
Yeah.
It's like I said, I mean, maybe you come into this game with nothing to lose and you kind of throw out some different things and see what you can do. And then Ohio State has an off night and you beat them. I think we talk about scouting report a lot because you and I live this life playing at these levels. In the Big Ten right now, you have those teams you're going to circle, those top 10 teams, and there's a few of them in the Big Ten. And so you've got this front half of the conference, and then you've got this back half of the conference. And the back half of the bottom half of the conference is actually pretty bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's also tough to get up, to prepare for those big teams, to do all the scouting that you're going to do, to have to play against a Juju Watkins and some of these players that are Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts and all these players that are just like phenomenal right now. And then speaks to the fact that you can't sleep on anybody. You have to still prepare to go out there and take care of business. And I'm not saying Ohio State didn't do this, but they just didn't come out and play their game. And I think you have to day in and day out, or else you lose games like this that you absolutely need to win if you want to be on the top half of this conference right now. So it's a bad loss for Ohio State again.
2 quick little points. I think the highlight for me was points in the paint. Penn State had 34 and Ohio State had 14. I mean, we talk about McMahon, her presence inside. That's just can't have that happen, especially when you're struggling to score, get those easy bunnies. I don't even know if I mentioned the score, FYI, but Ohio State lost by 3, 59-62. So we've talked about the top seeds that have struggled and had some upsets. Let's get to the second half where we have some top seeds that take care of business, get some wins, and let's shake this one off. All you, Sid.
All right, let's do it. Our third quarter here. I think it's going to be a little bit of a quicker quarter. We'll see. We get a little long-winded sometimes. We love it so much. But this quarter is all about South Carolina, ranked number 2 right now, beating Oklahoma, who was ranked 13th, 101-60.
Yikes.
How much is South Carolina in a league of their own right now? It's amazing to watch, actually.
So when we talk about these teams, and you just mentioned having to come in every day, the conference is tough play. And we've talked about this with South Carolina even being, as undefeated as they've been, winning streaks galore, national championships. They live this every day. And I think Dawn Staley has mentioned that yes, they've had close games, but it's always going to be something they have to fight. I think every team's going to have that ups and downs no matter what. But I think they absolutely dominated this game, completely took Oklahoma out of everything they wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. They outscored the Sooners 28-9 in the first quarter. And they never looked back, right? They got up by as much as 43 points in this one.
Wow.
I mean, it was just an absolute butt kicking. And I'll speak to it again. So the Gamecocks are 3 games through a 5-game stretch against ranked opponents. They've won them all by an average of 25.3 points. They're in their own league right now to me. And there's still a few tough games to come. They've got to play LSU coming up here on Thursday. That's not going to be an easy one. Kim Mulkey is going to try to have her team prepared and not get embarrassed like a couple of these teams have recently. Texas did, Oklahoma did. We saw Iowa State earlier in the season really get embarrassed by them. And when you get embarrassed like that, it's huge on how you respond. I think Iowa State down the stretch here has not really responded all that well. I mean, that's been a team that's really fallen off since that point. And so you've got to see Texas turn it around, and now Oklahoma's going to have to turn it around. And interestingly enough, Oklahoma is one of the best teams in the country for assists in the game, but they are the worst team in the SEC with turnovers per game in conference play here.
Interesting.
They got to take care of the ball, and I think there was many things they needed to do better against South Carolina, but that was a big thing, is just overall taking care of the ball. You've got to control possessions by not turning it over. 22 turnovers to South Carolina's 6 turnovers.
Wow. Man, South Carolina 6? That's damn good.
It is. And shout out to South Carolina coach Dawn Staley. So we're a couple days after her signing a contract that makes her the highest paid coach in history of the women's basketball game. She has stretched her streaks to 53 straight SEC regular season wins and 68 straight wins at Colonial Life Arena for home games. I mean, it's just unprecedented what she's doing right now, the body of work that she's done at South Carolina. I mean, you could argue that UConn's done a lot of this too down the stretch, but this is the new game. This is the new era. And Dawn's doing it in the new era, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, she's legit. I think she's probably one of the best coaches that can handle this transition and still have that high expectation for her players, just because she lived, loved, and understands the game so deeply, being the amazing player she was. I mean, I almost feel like she could go out there. She's probably going to disagree with this, but go out there and like hoop with them. Do you know what I mean? She just has that flair of confidence and expectation that I think when you go to South Carolina, I mean, you know what it is.
Exactly. The expectations are there. And to your points, I think Dawn's a player's coach. I think because she's lived it. I mean, it's fun to watch her on the sidelines, right? She's got like Gucci sweatshirts on. And I think she just meets the players where they're at.
Yep.
You see her repping the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, and just having fun during practice and having dance parties at practice and stuff. I think that appeals to the youth nowadays.
Yeah.
Where, yes, it's business. Yes, we expect to win and win big, but we're also going to look at it and be real about things and, yes, get better, but have fun while we're doing it. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. One more thing I just wanted to add that, this was a big matchup. We highlighted it. It's a number 2 playing a 13. I really expected Oklahoma to at least compete at a different level. Going back to some of South Carolina's games, USF held that they were within 16 points of South Carolina. So to see a number 13 seed get blown out 41, I mean, it's just, you have to imagine that playing the worst game you've ever played, all of you, and it being televised and hyped up. It's definitely deflating. I'm going to be interested to see Oklahoma get back on track.
Absolutely. And when I look at South Carolina and you look at the players on their team, yes, they're very good in their own rights. But Dom will even say it like, we don't have a starter. If they were rookies in the WNBA season coming up, there's not one girl on my team that would probably start in the WNBA. So it's not like they have the Juju Watkins or the Caitlin Clarks and don't get me wrong, Malaysia Fawali is a hell of an athlete, hell of a basketball player. Pow, hell of an athlete, hell of a basketball player. I mean, we can go down the list. Raven Johnson, all these players, but they just don't athlete for athlete necessarily beat people on paper, but when they play as a team and they play Dawn's style and the preparedness, they're capable of still beating equal athletes by 40 points. Like, I just think it's kind of crazy what Dawn has built there in the system she has set up for these players to succeed in.
Without a doubt. Dawn's legit and they're paying her to stay. So I think that speaks volumes.
Amen to that one.
Let's jump over to our fourth quarter where we're just going to highlight some of these higher seeds able to hang on. First one up that we're going to do a bit more, go into a bit deeper on, is number 4 USC. They were able to beat an unranked IU 73-66. IU, for me, has been so oddly up and down. They only lost to UCLA by 9, but at the start of the season, when we kind of had those high expectations for them, they lost to UNC by 30. They lost to Harvard in overtime. They lost to Butler by 10, only scoring 46 points. So to go from losing to Butler by 10 and putting 46 on the board to hanging with the number 4 team USC and putting up 66, that's really like 80 something plus against a Butler, right? they've completely done a 180. I don't know if it's the new year. I don't know if they're just finally understanding roles and kind of how to be successful, but it's absolutely great to see Hoosier basketball. And especially because IU women have been doing so well in the last couple of years. They've making tournaments, making a run, getting big wins. And obviously they played this at Assembly Hall. So it was the first time that USC was able to play there and it was rocking. We talk about environments. That is IU. That is Assembly Hall. USC's only loss this season still is to Notre Dame earlier on. So interesting to see the dynamic and flow of this game. USC trailed in the second quarter, 25-14. They got it back going into before halftime. They were able to get up by 9 late in the third. Juju seemed off in general, but she got it together more so in the second half, got into a nice flow. For me, it's always interesting, and we've talked about this before, is USC having more individuals come and support. It can't always be Kiki and Juju. It's got to be more starters or even people from the bench. USC had 5 starters in double figures. Kiki had 14. Marshall had a nice double-double with 13 and 10. Talia had 10. Smith had 14. And Juju put up 22. But the concern for me, and you can have games where this happens. You have 0 bench points because all your starters showed up and did their job in a tough environment against a team that was very confident. And just like Penn State had nothing to lose, whether they won or lost, they just went out there and played. IU also had 4 starters in double figures. Garzon, their 3-point shooting threat, had 10 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists. Sid Parrish showed up. She's kind of been up and down. I know she's had some injuries as well, but it was great to see her get a nice double-double with 16 points, 10 boards. This game went back and forth. At one point, USC was up 9. At one point, IU was up 11. So this was definitely just a game of runs that USC was able to withstand those runs and in the environment of IU and hold them off to win by 7.
I love the environment talk. It was atmosphere all day in Assembly Hall. It came through on the television watching it. And I talked about Penn State, how there was absolutely none. So it was refreshing watching that IU game. And I think it's super fun. It speaks to the program that Terry has built there and what IU basketball should be. I mean, we're talking the Hoosier State here.
Yeah.
And so they're welcoming number 4 USC and arguably the best player in the country. And we're going to argue between Paige and Juju all day, but Juju is that X factor and brings that star power. So it's fun to see IU fans show up for that. And honestly, if the last 5 minutes of that game go any different, IU could have pulled off this upset. And I think it's their defensive pressure and what they were able to do. Juju doesn't score in the first quarter, right? They hold her to 0 points in that first quarter. And they talked about it at halftime. The commentators and the announcers were talking about how IU was purposely crowding Juju on the wing and constantly giving some second and third bodies checking over to her. And I thought it worked pretty well. And I'm also thinking, okay, how are they going to counter this? How is Gottlieb going to counter this at halftime? And sure enough, there were some noticeable possessions where you saw some of that 2-man game come back where they were clearing other people off and truly having Juju Iriafen on one side of the floor. And I thought that was a great halftime adjustment. I think it helped Juju get going a little bit more because she wasn't feeling as crowded. It was easy for IU in that first half to double and sometimes triple over on Juju, depending on where the ball was in the possession. And so I thought that was an interesting thing. It had to have been talked about at halftime because even the commentators were picking up and noticing it, right? So the assistants and Gottlieb are watching that. And it was a good halftime adjustment, I thought, from USC.
Yeah. I think it's good that you called that out because I don't think they had those halftime adjustments or even in-game adjustments as much earlier on in the season. I think that's something, and this is me hypothetically speaking, I think over Christmas break, sat down, probably had some time to dig into some film and to see where and what they could be doing differently. They lost the assistant coach for USC. He's now going to be coaching in the WNBA. So I think it just gave them some time to readjust things because, yes, they're a number 4 seed, but it seems like they struggle at times and they're not as dominant as I think we all see them as being. So it's definitely just interesting. And it was great to see that halftime adjustment for sure.
Having watched all the games, a lot of their games this season, the big ones, certainly, USC goes as Juju goes. But that's basketball. You think back historically, the Chicago Bulls went as Michael Jordan went, right? You talk about Caitlin Clark and what she did at Iowa. Iowa was as successful as they were because Caitlin Clark showed up and scored all those points in all those games. They need Juju to do that. So I think there needs to be that hyper focus on how do we get her more involved in the game. And if she's struggling in the first half, you are absolutely having that conversation at halftime as coaches. Like, we need to get her going. What do we need to do differently? So I thought that was huge.
Yeah. Props to IU though. Great to see the Hoosiers back and just competing, right? It's to have those losses earlier on in the season, and right now they're 12-6, so not terrible, but just some unexpected ones that, preseason games you're expecting to win and kind of get rolling on. So definitely interesting.
Yeah, one thing I thought that was kind of interesting in the game is when you watch IU play, they play with an Adidas basketball. And I'm assuming when you were at Notre Dame, you also played with an Adidas basketball.
Yep. We had Adidas racks on racks.
There you go. It's just so interesting. And I think as fans and people that watch the game and maybe didn't play at that level, when we were at Tennessee, my freshman and maybe my sophomore season also, I'm not sure, at some point we switched, but we had Baden basketballs and they were just a different feel. Every ball has a slightly different feel to it. A lot of the Nike schools, I remember when we would play Stanford, they had a Nike ball. Oklahoma, a Nike ball. UConn, a Nike ball, right? So it is a different ball than the tournament ball. So the NCAA tournament ball is a Wilson basketball. We eventually switched to that Wilson basketball at Tennessee, and I think it made a lot of sense because that's the ball you're going to play with in the tournament.
Why don't they? That makes no sense to me. Why even have all these other versions? And it should just be Wilson, period.
I agree. And I think it must be that maybe Adidas has it in the contract that IU needs to play with that ball. But I'm looking at that ball like, God, let's hope that they change that thing since when we played.
If they go back to that contract, I would specifically look for that line to be removed. That's nuts. And you mentioned the feel of every ball being a bit different and how you play. Absolutely, it makes sense now that I'm remembering pregame shoot-arounds and you practice at a gym the night before, getting used to the ball. Hey, it's different. Make sure you're getting reps on reps up, getting a feel for it, doing some ball handling. Yuck. It should just all be Wilson. That's so weird.
Absolutely. And I would love when tournament time would roll around because it was just the Wilson ball. We didn't have to worry about that. I remember preparing for Stanford for a whole week and a half, and we'd have Nike balls out there on the racks. And I'm just like, oh, I hate this ball so much. It's my least favorite is the Nike one. I just feel like it has a harder feel. Yeah. And they might have changed it. It might be different now, but back then it certainly was a big difference from that Wilson NCAA ball. So just a weird anecdote there and something I thought that was kind of interesting watching the IU game.
So USC continues their Midwest tour. They're going to be playing Purdue, and then they're going to be hosting Minnesota at home. So jumping into our next two games, just to highlight some higher seeds hanging on to some tough games. Number 24, Minnesota, is currently 17-2. I mean, what a great record for Minnesota. I'm sure they're in their second wave of conference where, they got to play the USCs, UCLAs. They're coming. They were able to hold on and beat Northwestern, who's 7-10, respectfully. Northwestern has given people, as of late, a pretty good run for their money, but Minnesota was able to hold on and win by 5, a score of 87-82. Jumping over to our second game, just to highlight, we've mentioned NC State quite a bit this season. Kind of had their ebbs and flows, being ranked and unranked, having some losses, back-to-back ones. But number 24, NC State, who's currently 14-4, they were able to hold on as well and beat Virginia, who is schedule-wise 11-8, by a score of 73-68. So just some higher ranked, meaning in the 20s, ranked teams getting challenged by those teams that aren't ranked, but being able to hold on and win it out. So good to see that, but also great for the women's game in general. You have some unranked fighting and gnawing, right? We have upsets with an unranked Vanderbilt, an unranked Penn State. I mean, I think it's just the parity in women's basketball of I'm going to come out here and I'm going to give it my all and just play and see what happens, I think is pretty awesome. And it's only going to continue to grow.
Yeah, parity for sure. One thing that's also worth noting is Paige Beckers is back. So she did play against Seton Hall where they won by 60. So, no big deal for UConn there, winning by 60 points.
Yeah.
And she had 18 points and played for 23 minutes. So great to see her back. I think that's really good for our game as well.
Yep, absolutely. A name in women's basketball, specifically college. And I mean, even having her NIL deals for Unrivaled. So great to see her back healthy and getting back in the flow of things for sure.
All right, so let's sum up today's episode. The first half, as Becca has mentioned, was all about those upsets. First quarter, we highlighted the Tennessee loss to Vanderbilt, 71-70. The second quarter was Ohio State falling to Penn State, 62-59. Third quarter was all about South Carolina and their dominance right now. Fourth quarter was about those higher seeds hanging on and taking care of business this past weekend. And with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude. Just a reminder to hit us up on our social medias. Please send any comments or questions that you want heard on air when we do our next Huddle episode. And we look forward to talking to everyone soon. Great talking to you, Becca.
Always good to see you. Bye, Sid.
Bye, Beck.
That's the 28.5 final buzzer for today's episode. Don't forget to hit follow and download on your preferred podcast platform to catch every play-by-play. New episodes drop each week throughout the season.
If you've enjoyed our courtside chat, drop us a review or follow us on our social media accounts where you can send us questions that may be selected for our Team Huddle Q&A episodes. And remember, from females who have played the game, the size of the ball matters.